Hello, my name is Dr. Latonia Craig, and I am the Assistant Dean for Inclusive Excellence at Purdue University in the College of Veterinary Medicine. Today, we are going to talk about meaningful allyship, and we will discuss this with a student lens. Before we can dive into this conversation, in the book, Better Allies, Everyday Actions to Create Inclusive, Engaging Workplaces, you have the author here who talks about the 7 characteristics of allyship. Now, in this book, it really does have a corporate focus, but I think the way in which allyship are characterized in this book, it can be adapted to any platform. And so what I want to do here is go through those 7 characteristics of allyship, but I will be approaching this from a student lens and things that students can do for adapting allyship. So the first form of allyship is the sponsor. The sponsor is someone who will vocally support the work of their peers from underrepresented groups in all contexts, but specifically in situations where one can show the value of their ideas, their contributions, and their overall work. So for instance, they may recommend their peers for leadership positions or for opportunities that they may not have considered before. They may even share those names with faculty members, or they may hear a faculty member who might be looking for students to take on a specific project or task. And usually these individuals, their names are not, who's recommended. Those names are not usually just brought up in casual conversation. They normally have to be brought up by other individuals, like someone who is activating this role of the sponsor or ally. Sponsors tend to give shout outs for ideas, or they like to highlight someone who has helped to move the work forward, whether it be a member or a group in the class or someone who's behind the scenes. They may not be a front-facing member of their class, and that individual is usually quiet, but it is important that recognizing the efforts and impact that your peer is contributing, it does go a long way. Then we have the champion. The champion, this type of ally works similarly to the sponsor, but champions are more intentional about their public messaging. They tend to advocate for groups that may not have access to the space, but they recognize the need to fill that void. They join organizations that have a social justice sort of platform. They also tend to bring up conversations of inclusion in all spaces, regardless of who is or is not in the group at the time. They may advocate for more women in leadership roles, more faculty or a curriculum that includes current events or topics that focuses on underserved areas. They tend not to be afraid to admit when they do not know something, and they will easily, direct questions to those with more subject matter expertise. Then we have the amplifier. Now, this type of ally wants to ensure that when someone speaks from a marginalized group, that they are not just heard, but they are also respected. Amplifiers tend to focus on a representation within communication. So you may be doing a group project, or you're in a study group and you notice that one of your peers is barely saying anything. So you may invite the person to the conversation by simply saying, hey, Tanya, you always have great ideas. What are your thoughts on this? The amplifier's purpose is to always create a space for a person to join the discussion in the most meaningful way. So if a person does join the conversation, or when they decide to join the conversation, and if they're interrupted by someone in the room, the amplifier is known to be that sort of ally that will interject and say, I'd like to hear them finish. The amplifier is also someone who is interested in having some sort of code of conduct for meetings, whether it be email communication, social media platforms, to ensure that everyone is respected and valued in the conversation. Their opinions or their perspectives are captured. And so it creates a space where people will feel comfortable contributing. And when they do contribute, they will be heard, and those perspectives will be valued. Then we have the advocate. Now, this ally they tend to use their power and influence to bring peers from underrepresented groups into spaces that have been historically homogenous in thought and representative of a few. They tend to hold peers accountable for including colleagues of all backgrounds. They also encourage collaboration with diverse groups, even, diverse student organizations. Here we have the scholar. This ally seeks to learn as much as possible about the challenges and prejudices faced by colleagues from marginalized groups, listening and learning so they can be more culturally sensitive in their interactions, current. They want to be informed. Scholars, they tend to ask the very tough questions because they really do want to learn. And they may even suggest events, or they want to engage in programming that seeks to move a college forward surrounding critical conversations. Um, the scholar consistently tends to share what they've learned, finding time to do and to be better. They also read publications by and about underrepresented groups within their industry and field. Then we have the upstander. The upstander is someone who sees wrongdoing and acts to combat and push back on offensive comments or jokes, even if no one can hear it within earshot that might be offended or hurt. They always speak up if they witness behavior or speech that is degrading or offensive. And then they tend to also shut down off-topic questions that are asked only to test the individual. The upstander does tend to take action if they see anyone in their organization being bullied or harassed. It's important for us to realize that it is our responsibility, regardless of what allyship is activated here, to tell someone. We should try to do this in the moment when the stakes are much high, and the upstander tends to do that. Sometimes we tend to take a few weeks or a few days to ponder over if we want to say something, and the moment has passed at that point, but the person who was directly impacted, we tend to forget that person is still in the moment, believe it or not, and they are wishing that someone would have said something. So it's important to think about that. The upstander tends to be one who does it when the decision to intervene, it may be unpopular, but they know that it's the right thing to do. And not only does that show support to the individual that is being targeted, but it also puts the person who is doing the bullying, it puts them on notice that it is not okay. Then we have the confident. The confident is an ally that creates a safe space for members of underrepresented or marginalized groups to express their fears, their frustrations, and needs. Simply listening to their stories and trusting that they are being truthful creates a protective layer of support. The confident, they listen. They ask questions when someone describes an experience that they haven't heard. Being there is key. Why is allyship important? Whenever there is an imbalance, which tends to happen more than what we would like to think, there needs to be something in place to restore some sort of balance in the space to the conversation, just in general. And in order for that balance to be restored, the most important thing that we can do is use our voice. Our voice is powerful in so many different ways. But when it comes to injustices, iniquities that may be present, the treatment of individuals in a space where there might be someone in power, someone who is not, who are making comments that could be damaging to an individual or to groups, it is important for us to activate our voice. That is what allyship is. And to do it, whether a person can hear you or not, but to do it because it's the right thing to do. All right. And we want to all be on the right side of this. Raising awareness. It is important for us to leverage our position, the privilege and power that we may have access to, take responsibility for whatever privileges those are, and then learn to leverage the power to advocate for change. And you do that again by using your voice. And some important things that all of us can do is to learn how to be more self-reflective. You got to do the work. Identify the personal characteristics that you bring to the table. Identify the privileges and powers that you have in a space, in a room, in a position. Know system positionality, where you fall on that. Become proficient in environmental scanning, which is look around. What is happening? What do you see? What do you hear? You can't intervene if you're not paying attention. So we really do have to be very self-reflective about what's happening around us and choose to intervene when you do hear or say something, because our ability to turn it off or on is a choice. So we do need to recognize that we do need to be on. And then also develop working knowledge. Learn what you do know, learn what you don't know, learn what you need to learn, learn differing perspectives, and learn that you exist in a historical system that has, where there has been historical iniquities that have made up some of the systems that we tend to be in. So a lot of those things can continually be perpetuated. But if we don't step back, reflect on how it may impact especially marginalized groups, then we will miss the mark there. So it's important for us to understand what those things are so that we can get some insight as to how to approach it, so that we can begin breaking down barriers that have been there for a long time. And then also we want to develop skills, learn to use communication, learn to use your facilitation skills when you're intervening, knowing what to say, knowing what not to say, learning how to say it, learning to use some form of emotional intelligence so that people are not caught off guard by the messaging because they are more focused on how you delivered the message. Learn to read your context, exercise embodied practice. You have to continually exercise some of the things that you're taking in and learning in, and making sure that you're on top of best practices to ensure that you're doing the right thing so that you remain current and informed about all things. Now, one of the things that's so important in this work is this idea of empathy. It is underplayed, but it is so significant when we're talking about allyship. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's thought and feelings and situations from their point of view rather than your own. All right, it's about perspective taking, able to see things from another point of view, which I always tell individuals to use their moral imagination, putting yourself in the position of someone else. How would you feel if this happened to you? And then sometimes, you do that and you don't know what to do. But what I always tell people, you get those gut feelings, you get this pit in your stomach that gives you some sort of indication that something isn't right. All right, something has to be done. And when you think about that feeling, if you are able to look at it from the perspective of another person, or even say to yourself, if I were in that situation, what would I want a person to say or do on my behalf? And if you know the answer to that question, then you should know what to do, because that will give you some insight as to what to do. What would you want someone to do for you if the shoe was on the other foot? Then also, being able to, with perspective taking, it also allows you to feel physically along with the other person, feel whether, if they feel included, if they feel excluded, if they feel, um, um, dismissed. You can tap into some of those emotions, because emotions are definitely contagious. When someone is going through something, and you've connected with the person, you can pick up on some of those emotions as well. And then just being compassionate, understanding that a person's predicament, and then also feeling with them. You might just be spontaneously encouraged to move to help if needed, when you are able to show an empathetic concern. Now, what are the barriers to becoming an ally? And there are several, okay? We are not that. Allyship is the responsibility of everyone. It falls to everyone. There's something that everyone in the room, in a space, is something that they can do. And remember, there are instances where you might be an ally, and there's other instances where you might need an ally. So, depending on how you intervene when you are supposed to be an ally, will also determine who comes to support you when you might need an ally. So the two go hand in hand. So allyship is the responsibility of everyone. And just some suggested readings: Better Allies, Everyday Actions to Create Inclusive, Engaging Workplace. That's where the seven characteristics of allyship came from. But again, remember, it uses it from a corporate lens. And in this context, I wanted it to be more student centered, because I know that that's who the audience is here. And then also we have From Intent to Impact, which are the five dualities of diversity and inclusion by Monica Diaz. All right. Thank you.